Hello everyone. In this video tutorial, we'll see about the final keyword in Java. There is a keyword named as final in Java, and that's a very important keyword actually, which is used for restricting the variables, method and class access in a certain way. So we'll see regarding the Java final keyword, which will be used for the variables, for the methods and for the classes. One thing to be remembered that the final keyword can be applied with the variables, and a final variable which is not initialized with any value is known as the blank final variable or uninitialized final variable. That uninitialized final variable is very important because this kind of final variable can only be initialized with the constructor of the class only. The uninitialized final variables can be static also, which will be initialized in the static block then if you make the final static variables, then that final static variable can be only accessible for initialization in the static block. And if you don't make it static, then it can be only accessed in the constructor of the class. Now we'll see that in detail one by one. Let's start with the Java final variable. So Java final variable is used for stopping the value change. So when you make a variable as final, then you cannot change the value of this variable. It will be constant. It cannot be used for method overloading, and it cannot be used for stop inheritance. To inherit. So when you make a class final, it will stop the inheritance because you cannot inherit that class. If you make a method as final, it cannot be overridden to its derived classes. And if you make a variable as final, then the value cannot change. Now we'll see this thing, this example we'll see one by one. So we'll make it. Now this is a class hello world. There we have a final variable. We are using the final keyword for that. Correct? And the speed limit is set as 90. Correct? Now using a method over here, the void run method, if we try to set the limit as 400, then what will happen? It will throw an error because the limit is set to 90. It cannot be modified. So if you create an object of the hello world class, and if you call on the run method, it will give an error because run method is trying to change the speed limit of the speed limit is the final variable, that it will give a compile time error here. See, if I run it, it will give an error. Cannot assign a value to final variable speed limit. So speed limit is the final variable, you cannot change its value. So here is showing the error. Speed limit is equals to 400 is an error. So you cannot change the final variable's value. Yes, now we'll see regarding the final method. If we make a method as final, then what will happen? We'll take this example. As I told before that it cannot be overridden anymore. We cannot override a final method, as simple as that. So now we see that we have make a method void run. So void run can be overridden, right? Because this bike class is inherited to the class Honda. So as the definition of inheritance and override come, it should supposed to easily overridden, correct? We should supposed to easily override what? Override the run method of bike to the derived class Honda, correct? But as the void run is made as final, we cannot override it. So if you call by using the Honda class object the run method, it cannot run the method. It cannot execute this run method. It will give an error because it's the final method. It cannot be overridden. Overriding the method is final, so you cannot override it anymore. Yes, so in this way we can restrict the method overriding by providing the final keyword. Now we'll see about the final class. So if you make a class as final, then that class cannot be inherited. It cannot go for the, it cannot be as consumed as the super class or base class. See here, the bike class, I have not given any definition. We have not written anything inside. Okay, just a simple class we make because we know anyhow that the final class cannot be inherited. Now we are trying to inherit the bike class to the class Honda 1. Is it possible? No, because the class is given as final. So whatever you write inside and whatever you do over here, this program is going to give an error because the final class cannot be inherited. Cannot inherit from final bike. So the class bike is final, so it cannot be inherited. That's what the Java compiler says. Now we'll give you some answers of the generally asked questions. Is final method inherited? Yes, the final method is inherited. It cannot be overridden. It's a very tricky concept actually. We can override a final method, okay? You see here in this code. See, this final method run is now being inherited here. And we are using the new Honda's object and calling the run method. It will be giving correct output only. See, the running is being printed. Correct? So we can call the run method because the run method is available to the Honda class because it is inherited the class bike. And run method is defined inside the class bike. So using the object of the Honda class, you are creating an on-the-fly object, anonymous object, and calling the run method, and you are getting the output. But if you try to, as you've seen in the last program, if you try to override the run method into the derived class Honda 2 here, then it will give an error. It's not possible to override, but yes, it is overridden properly. What is blank or uninitialized final variable? At the very beginning, I told this very tricky question. An uninitialized final variable is a variable which is not initialized. The only way to initialize it is by using the constructor of the same class where the final variable is declared. And if it is the static, then we'll go to the next point actually. That's enough. We will go to the next question. Can you initialize blank final variable? Yes, only in the constructor. We'll see this example. How in the constructor we can initialize a non-initialized final variable. This final variable is speed limit. It is not initialized with any value. So it's a blank final variable or uninitialized final variable. We can only use the constructor of the class bike and modify or assign the value to this final variable. Otherwise it will give an error. If you want to give some value over here, it's not a good idea. Never give that. Never try to fix some value over here. Okay. Rather, you always set up the value. See this. It's not a good idea. It will give an error. We cannot give over here. We cannot modify the value over here. Rather, we can only modify the value of the final variables inside the constructor of the class bike. The line number 4 to 7 is the constructor, default constructor of the class bike, right? There we can modify the final variables value and set it to the 70. And we can print it over here. Speed limit. Now public static void main string args new bike. We are creating an object of the class bike. So when you are creating this anonymous object, definitely this constructor is being called. So speed limit is set to 70 and it is being printed. So it will be printing the value 70. In this way, we can understand that a final variable can be only initialized if it is not initialized, a blank final variable. Uninitialized final variable can only be initialized inside the constructor of the class only. Now we'll see about the static blank final variable. As you have told at the beginning, a static blank final variable can be initialized only within the body of a static block, not outside. Yes, if you make it static, see the same program is there, just I have make it as static. Correct? It is giving error because it cannot be initialized within the constructor. Rather only in the static block we can. Here you can see that we have used a static block. So if you use a static block, then only these things can be executed, otherwise not. It's a very tricky thing actually. So these things are generally asked into the interviews. See now when I make this as a static block, then the speed limit for this static final variable can be changed and this line will also execute its value. Yes, see, I've again executed making this line number 9, that is creation of object, as here I make commented. So this line is not executed. As you can understand, static block will execute for sure without creating the object of the class, and then also the same result it is giving. If you want to create object and see that effect, then also it's possible. No need to create the object. The class name dot variable is sufficient, as you know, for the static variable, right? So you'll use the same strategy over here. See here. Now the static variable integer data we are using, and the data value is initialized only within the static block. Correct? Can only be changed only within the static block, because this final integer data, this final variable is static kind of. So if you want to call this variable, you have to use the class name where it resides. So class A it belongs to, right? So class A dot the name of the static final variable data. So then it will give the output 50. We are setting the value 50, right? See, the output is now giving correctly 50. Now what is a final parameter? See, a final parameter is a parameter which is provided as final, cannot be changed anymore. So I'll see here, this final integer n is a parameter to the cube method. Cube is a method, right? It's int cube. So cube is the method which is having a parameter. The parameter is final. So the value of n can be taken, but it cannot be modified. You don't modify with plus or this calculations. If you pass this, if you call this cube method and pass 5, it's all okay. You can pass it, but you should not supposed to modify it. If you modify, it will give a compile time error here. Not a statement. It's not a correct statement. N into n into n. It's not a good statement. It cannot be changed actually. So it is giving the result. It cannot be changed. A static parameter's value cannot be changed. Now the last question, and we'll finish up this portion, this particular topic. Can we declare a constructor final? How can you declare a constructor final? Because constructor is never inherited, na? So constructor can never be given as a final one. We can make a class as final, we can make a method as final, or we can make a variable as final in Java. Hope that you have enjoyed learning final keyword in Java through this video tutorial. If you like this video, then please subscribe to my channel and tell your friends and those who are learning Java to watch the videos. Thank you very much.